reduce the amount of carbon. If we're going to go down this road, and we are going down this road, on limiting carbon, that is a different kind of carbon than the carbon where we're pumping it out of the ground and we're putting new carbon that hasn't been there in the air for a long time. There's a lot of things to come around climate change.
Well, without the carbon, what do these so-called smart, sophisticated guys, how do they expect this tree to live, that grass to live?
Now they say that's okay as long as the tree's putting down roots, it's putting carbon into those roots, and don't you dare dig those roots up, and don't you could use that tree for lumber, just don't burn it. And yet it was carbon in the air. And there are folks that have gone through some of the gyrations to say, we've got opportunities in agriculture to store some carbon in our soils as well. We have a lot of carbon in our soils, organic matter in our soils. The process for figuring out whether we get credit for that, how much, how do you measure it, do you really know if you're getting it or not getting it, is it no-till gets it and ridge-till doesn't get it, or conservation-till does or doesn't. What if you have a short crop, you haven't put as much carbon in the soil? This thing is a mountain of numbers to climb, and it's got sometimes more politics in it than it does science. But it's coming. It's going to be here, and we're all going to deal with it. We're going to have carbon taxes and the cap and trade and some of these pieces. We're going to have to figure out how to make the best use of it. And it's going to have a real impact out there. So to everyone.
I'm afraid the real impact is when people add that's what
that could, well, the comment was he's thinking that the real impact is the reaction to people saying, what the heck are you talking about? And people push back and say, we're not going to go there. One of those pieces right now that's being talked about, I refer to it indirect land use, and it's saying that when you look at ethanol, you look at the whole cost of carbon production of corn, you look at the cost of the carbon production of converting corn into ethanol, that is clearly better than gasoline. Besides the fact, a bunch of it came from the air, but even if you didn't count for that, it's clearly better than gasoline. But if you look at potentially somebody's tearing down a rainforest someplace because we're producing corn here that goes into an ethanol plant, then it's not as good as gasoline. But who in the world can come up with the numbers to make that all work? And certainly my argument would be, if that's the first one out of the box, and that's the best scientific argument you have on how to make analysis on carbon, this is not a great starter for them to figure out how to manage carbon by looking at low carbon fuel and blaming corn for tearing down rainforests. And I mean, to me, it puts the whole idea of climate change in the air just a little bit. I'd say you lead with your best science. If this is the best science, that's not good stuff. I think there's a real chance of pushback at something like that.
Yeah, we're a growing export market. You haven't commented on that. What are you doing in that area? And are you working with the Department of Economic Development to increase our exports, or are you doing that out of the department?
Really the promotion, the ag promotion activities, the international market activities is centered out of the Department of Economic Development. They have the folks, but we've also participated. I've gone with the corn growers to Cuba. I've gone with soybean folks to China. We just did a release yesterday on the countries that have not started taking up pork again. So we engage in this piece. Exports are big to us. You know, right now, if you're a soybean farmer, you know China's buying soybeans. We got $3 better soybeans than we had about a month and a half ago. And part of it is because China is buying a record amount of soybeans. And will likely be a very, very strong market. Part of it's also they've had production problems in South America. But a big part of it is that China's buying a bunch of soybeans. Corn, it's always been a big market for corn as well. In fact, last year, in spite of all the noise about food versus fuel, how we're not going to have enough corn, things are coming to an end. We got people starving around the world. We had our highest export year in 25 years. because we had 2.5 billion bushels of exports last year. Now, we're not going to have that many exports this year. There's more wheat production, other kinds of things. We had that at the highest price level that we've ever averaged for corn. The corn was available, and certainly corn went out. Corn is very important for pork production last year. Pork exports were their highest they'd ever been. In fact, China bought $700 million worth of pork last year. Huge numbers. $13 million a week. Now, about a month ago, they decided not to buy U.S. pork because of, swine flu. Not because we had any pigs with swine flu, or as we prefer to call it, H1N1, but probably because they also have economic issues with their pork industry in their own country about whether their producers are making money or not. But they still, after 30 days, are still not importing U.S. pork. There's no way you can make a case for a second that there's any health and safety reasons why they should not be importing U.S. pork. That alone, now who knows what it would be right now. If that ban wasn't in place, how much we would send there. But last year at this time, we were sending $13 million a week to China. And if that's true, then in the last 4 weeks, we've lost $50 million worth of exports just to China. And they're the big one, but just to China. So this has been important. The other thing, in fact, it's impacted certainly the dairy industry as well. Dairy's going through tough times right now. A lot lower prices than what cost of production is. One of the reasons we've seen some of this flip here is that a year ago we saw higher dairy exports than we've seen. That actually encouraged folks to expand their dairy production. Now, not only are other countries competing with us more, New Zealand and some of the other countries that weren't exporting as much a year ago, but we had the recession as well, and that's cut the demand, and we went from $22 milk a year ago to $10 milk now. That's per 100 pounds. And we got folks that are hurting. And certainly that export was a big part of that as well. So we do pieces clearance, but really the Department of Economic Development runs the China office, runs the Japan office, the Taiwan office that the state of Iowa has, and they do promotion not only of general products but of ag products, and we work with them.
So if that's the case that China has stopped the imports of our pork, have we stopped any of the imports of their products and coming into our country, and why not?
Well, that's we have not. You heard the question, and we reacted to that.
Should have stopped every ship coming in and turned them back.
We have not. Certainly there's a lot of suggestion that we ought to. The problem is, with thousands of products going back and forth, there's always somebody's mad at somebody. Now it's our ox being gored, and now they're not accepting these, and it's so obvious to us that they're wrong on this, that I think it makes perfect sense to look at retaliatory efforts in this. Now,
I would think we could hurt them worse than they could hurt us with swine.
in theory, you got to go through a WTO, which is an international panel. It takes some time. You get a chance to be able to then say, these are the products we want to stop, but it's about 6 or 9 months later. By that time, they go ahead and pull it back off again. We right now, when we're over there talking, there's some cooked chicken meat that comes from China, or should come from China into the U.S. We have restrictions on that. We probably shouldn't have restrictions on that. They're not very happy about that. They're taking that to the WTO, and they probably should, and we might lose. But the way that we're doing things, there's always these pieces of back and forth. Right now, it means a lot to us, because this is $50 million potentially of pork that's not going, on top of an industry that's had a tough 18 months. So, yes, we ought to. The process doesn't really help us in that, and it takes a long time. Actually, I think the Secretary of Ag, Secretary Vilsack, and some of the folks in the Obama administration, they have been very aggressive in some pretty tough talk to the Chinese, both privately and publicly on this. Now, it hasn't got it done yet, and we still have 15 other countries that